At the moment of quantum awakening, change will occur rapidly, rippling across the terrestrial surface like a wave. Everything in the Earth's gravitational field will be affected in some way. This will be a time of massive change, of change on a scale that has no historical precedent, though it does have antecedents in the prehistoric events of this and of distant worlds. The changes that your generation will experience before it passes the torch to another are more fundamental than those that accompanied the agricultural revolution, and those changes took thousands of years. They are more far-reaching than the changes of industrialization, which took nearly 3 centuries to transpire. Yet, deep and fundamental, massive though these present changes are, they will occur within the span of just a single human life. Properly understood, these changes and their coming have the ability to inspire a degree of hope and optimism unprecedented in the history of your race, for they spell the end of humankind's subconscious condition, and therefore portend, as the scriptures of the world foretell, an end to bloodshed, starvation, warfare, exploitation, and needless suffering. Within your lifetime, you will witness revelations that will show the foolishness of much that was once deemed wise. You will watch as traditions and historical habit patterns once assumed to be survival imperatives are discovered to be detriments to a healthy life and to a healthy society. Behavior that made sense for creatures who imagined they were islands of individuality is abandoned by those who experience the interconnectivity of all life. The consciousness that is awakening upon this world is no respecter of Darwinian values. Its perception brings new values and new ways of being. During these decades you are seeing the descent of the angels of healing. Even now, all around you, and perhaps in your own life, they are incarnating. In some cases, these are beings who have not known human form since before the descent of historical time. It is possible that you are among those who have held only a tenuous and flickering connection with your incarnational successions. It is no matter for judgment. Those who incarnate now, those who bring the fullness of their eternal talents, attributes, and perspectives into today's people, are the agents of healing. They alone have it in their power to experience this awesome time of transition, as glorious or traumatic. All are invited to remember their essence, their purpose, their reason for being here, and to bring through into this age of transformation the sense of celebration that invariably accompanies such remembrance. Our numbers upon the earth have grown rapidly since our first large-scale arrivals began in the late 1960s. Yet it is not quantity, not numbers that will make the difference, but the quality of our compassion, the quality of the love that radiates from our hearts. Every individual who becomes a clear and undistorted channel for eternal love into these times, offsets 1,000 who remain locked in the dissolving values of the old. We are rapidly dispelling what remains of human illusion, helping all to identify with the growing currents, the energies, and the forces of love and life. You are already living in the dawning hours of the age of planetary awakening, the age of peace and community building. It is here now for those sensitive to its fragrance, texture, majesty, and vision. The age has begun, when the earth is to be cultivated like a flower garden, and her gifts presented as conscious offerings to the gardeners of eternal beauty. The age when humankind returns its gifts to the earth, to her soil, her streams, her mountains, her oceans, her creatures of water, air, fire, and clay. The future, as always, holds an element of surprise. Yet some things are as certain as the movement of the stars. A mother never knows exactly what hour she will give birth to her child, but she has a due date, an approximate time when the baby is expected, and will most likely be born. For millennia now there have been those in various traditions of both East and West, who have known that the Earth has a due date, sometime during the second decade of the 21st century. Though there will be much awakening of individuals prior to the first unified movement of the awakened planetary organism, This movement, like a first breath, will occur in but a single moment. It is then that the Star Maker will consciously awaken in all systems of human biocircuitry, capable of sustaining universal awareness. Babies are sometimes born early, sometimes late. So be aware, be vigilant. Do not discount the possibility that the moment might come as a thief in the night. And do not be among the foolish, who will wait until the last moment to come to terms with the rising awareness. This is to be an important occasion. It is the event that is central to all of human history. Our emphasis for many thousands of years now has been and continues to be to prepare you for this single moment. For though the changes will be dramatic, they need not be traumatic. Though they will bring a fundamental human revisioning of reality's nature, this need not be perceived as threatening. Essentially, it is a positive and joyous event. The consciousness that will ultimately emerge will be the consciousness of the Eternal One, the Creator, the being of life, awakened aware for the first time inside a material universe. Human circuitry is designed to accommodate this consciousness. In much the same way that your individual cells understand their relationship to you, each awakened human being understands him, or herself, in hologrammatic relationship to this unified field of awareness. Since this perception of self differs significantly from historical perception, its emergence in collective human consciousness presents the potential for disorientation in those who might react to its coming in fear. We have much to do before the preparation of human consciousness is complete. Still, even if the awakening were to occur in this very moment, with no further preparation, it would be an event of unprecedented beauty. However, in that case fewer people would be in a position to appreciate it. We wish to maximize enjoyment and minimize discomfort for all concerned. If human beings understand more fully what is occurring, they will be less likely to react in ways that would cause them unnecessary discomfort. Regardless of whether one accepts this change, or attempts to back away from it, this event will be of greater power than any the Earth has ever seen. More energy will be released in a very few moments than is typically released upon the surface of the Earth in many years. This energy will take the form of heightened perception and deepened emotional connection, rejoining the individual and God. Though this unprecedented time of intensified energy radiation still lies a few years before you, you are already near enough to it, and the event itself is so powerful that time is behaving with increasing subjectivity, bubbling and warping, creating islands of the future, wherever there are those who deliberately invoke the energies of the emerging consciousness, and demonstrate willingness to live their lives in love. These are not disconnected islands beneath the receding seas of historical illusion. They are united in a veritable continent of rising awareness. As the new reality comes fully into human consciousness, at that moment when the Creator's luminous field comes into perfect alignment with the Earth Mother, all illusion of a destructive nature will be dissolved. Though there have been many centuries leading up to this moment, when the moment comes it will be decisive. There will be a great shift then, a single moment of quantum awakening. In this moment, the smallest interval of time measured in these dimensions, the interval that occurs in every atom between each of its billions of oscillations per second, will be lengthened unto infinity. An interval of non-time will expand. Through that expansion, eternity will flow. Some will experience this moment as minutes or hours, others as a lifetime. Still others will experience this flash of non-time as a succession of many lives, and some few will, in this moment, know the Nagil itself, the great nameless presence that exists before and after all these worlds. In the expanse of the non-time interval, human beings will have all the time they require to realize, experience, and remember the full consciousness of their eternal spirits, and to recall the origin of their individuality in the primordial fields of being. All will have ample time to recharge their form identity and its biological projection, with the awareness of who they are, why they have individualized, and why they have chosen to associate with this planet's human expression. Each one will have the choice to return to biological form, or to remain in the fields of disincarnate awareness. Those who choose to return to human form will do so fully aware of who they are. No longer will they be but partially incarnate, they will resume biological residence, with the full memory and consciousness of their eternal natures, sharing the creative capacities of the Star Maker, whose reflective cells they will then know themselves to be. Subconscious orientation in fear will be replaced by conscious orientation in love. The sudden release of power, as the polarity of the collective human emotional field shifts from outer to inner orientation, cannot be avoided no matter how smoothly we seek to guide this transition. All will feel an unmistakable surge of power, in the instant of quantum awakening. This is as inevitable as the daily rotation of the Earth's continents, into, and out of, the light of the sun. But the effects? The implications? There is no way to predict them. They depend on the choices you make today. By extrapolating current trends of consciousness, we can establish a probable range of effects. But there may be as many as 8 billion people incarnate at that moment, each with complete freedom of choice. And though the choices each one makes in his or her lifetime prior to that moment, will certainly predispose that person in one direction or another, there are no guarantees, no assurances. The spiritual polarity of collective human consciousness did shift once before, triggering a reversal of the Earth's magnetic field, a shifting in the position of the poles, and a great deal of destruction. However, that shift was a shift from consciousness to subconsciousness. We will have a degree of control during this conscious shift that was absent then, and so do not expect the same sort of cataclysmic shock waves. Still, it would be underestimating the variables to assume that Earth changes will not accompany this event. Almost certainly some will. These will be for the most part of a benevolent nature, a melting of the polar ice caps for example, bringing rain to arid regions and helping to cleanse toxins from polluted lakes and rivers, a warming and simultaneous moistening of climate that will open to agriculture the extensive plains and fertile river valleys of Greenland, Antarctica, and certain of the world's deserts. To minimize the trauma of this moment, both for you and for others of the human family, it is important that you prepare for it well ahead of time, establishing the habits that will leave yourself understanding fluid, relaxed, and trusting in the overall benevolence of the universe and its resident intelligence. The best way to prepare for any future moment in time is to be fully in your present moment, now. The only habit you must cultivate, though it may go against the programming and traditions of your society, is to allow into your consciousness the relaxed flow of attention that brings you a clear and accurate picture of the phenomenal world, and continuous awareness of the eternal presence from which it has unfolded. Such a state of consciousness will allow you to enjoy the rushing energy currents and heightened awareness that will sweep through the Earth during the expansion of the non-time interval, and will maximize the stabilizing influence that radiates from you into your local surroundings. Long before the moment of collective awakening, there will have been established a sufficient core of people functioning on higher frequencies of awareness, to enable the harmonic currents of their respective amplified radiations, to displace the influence of those who may react in fear, both at the moment of collective awakening, and beforehand. The frequency radiations or vibratory emissions of fear are not harmonious. Their effect on collective human consciousness increases at an arithmetical rate, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., for each additional person whose behavior is centered in fear, but they do not build in the kind of geometric progression, 2, 4, 8, 16, etc., that is characteristic of the harmonic radiations of love. Before the final instant of planetary awakening, the radiations of love will constitute the predominant vibrational influence on collective human consciousness. even while a numerical majority remains centered in historical orientation. That condition is now very near. You who are motivated by love, bring to bear on collective human awareness an influence much greater than your historical reason might suppose. Individually, you have an impact on the collective predispositions of your species, far greater than that of those who are merely treading the time-worn paths of self-centeredness. You who do your best to make your decisions out of love, who refuse to be controlled by the subconscious machinations of fear, who take time, if necessary, in difficult situations to proceed slowly, consciously, lovingly, are truly among our own. Your awareness of these things will soon be full. You are one upon whom we can depend during the coming shift. Improperly understood, among those who comprehend only fragments, and not the wholeness of what is occurring, in those whose minds do not function in tandem with their hearts, these changes and their coming do have the potential to inspire fear. For millennia, we have been educating all those of your race we could possibly reach, doing what we could to minimize the ignorance that alone is capable of fearing so wondrous an event. Yet it would be misrepresenting the challenges before us, not to acknowledge that such a potential still exists in isolated populations. There may be a few locations in the times between now and the moment of collective awakening, where various forms of media will be given over to the currents of fear. Though it has been prophesied that electronic media is to be one of love's most powerful and effective tools of transformation during the last days, facilitating education and catalyzing widespread awakening, it would be inaccurate to suppose that all media during the last years of history will be in the hands of those aligned with currents of love. It is probable that in certain backwater locations, where the shadows of fear had been retreating for some time, radio and television stations, perhaps even very powerful ones, will broadcast fearful interpretations of events, encouraging and stimulating fear among those foolish enough to look to them for understanding. There may even be entire networks oriented in this way. Remain centered throughout any waves of collective panic that may sweep susceptible populations during or following such broadcasts. Ignore the voices of fear that may, during times of crisis or fundamental upheaval, have momentary dominance in the media. They will not last. Their time of influence is rapidly nearing an end, and the less you energize them with the power of your attention, the more rapidly they will fade into the subconsciousness from which they have come. Media has always, and will always, reflect the values of those associated with it. This is as true of external electronic media, as it is of your own inner biological media. There is far more information circulating in this multidimensional universe than can be consciously monitored. The way you choose to focus your attention selects, from among the nearly limitless information in circulation, that information of which you become aware. Your electronic media is simply an outer reflection of the informational preferences you choose within you. Media, internal or external, is a mirror of your values and interests, a reflection of your consciousness. Global media is a reflection of developing global human consciousness, which has recently entered a period of accelerated change. Within the fields of collective human consciousness, a process of separation is occurring. The creative is expanding, the destructive, diminishing. I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt have no other gods before me, has an archaic ring to contemporary ears, but it is excellent perceptual advice, phrased in terms that those of an earlier age could understand. In terms more relevant to your age, it means simply that your God is that which holds your attention. Attention that is gripped by fiction is not free for perception. It is too preoccupied, too prejudiced, too conditioned to see what may lie beyond the realms of what it chooses to regard as real. There are times when this can be a harmless and enjoyable option, but when fiction is entered into so thoroughly that reality is forgotten and even denied, there is a sacrifice of health and happiness. A world of beauty and of wonder beyond all historical precedent, opens out before each one who attunes to inner informational currents. The inhabitants of that world naturally honor a God of love, because they live in love, and so experience its source within them. This world is not a static realm, it is a universal sphere of infinite opportunity. Its appearance in the midst of human history has been occurring subtly here and there since the close of World War II, but in the decades spanning the turn of the third millennium, such locations move into a period of rapid expansion, even as new ones proliferate. Islands of the future arise with increasing frequency. The sea of past programming recedes ever more rapidly. New communities, towns, villages, whole regions and nations adjust to the growing currents of love. This is the true news. Your media comments upon it often now, but by its very nature, electronic media is oriented to events, not to processes. As the new world slowly interpenetrates and fills the old, its more outstanding achievements and its moments of historic breakthrough qualify as events, and so are included in typical news coverage, but its greater work occurs subtly behind the scenes. Electronic media is well suited to covering events, but your inner media provides the only reliable means of monitoring the processes that are changing the world. You feel these processes in your heart and soul. Your own love-enhanced, love-heightened perception enables you to see them at work in the world. Often the greatest news occurs in the little things, in the casual greeting of a neighbor, in cooperative exchange between people of backgrounds or races that were once antagonistic. Friendly exchanges that could not have occurred a decade or a century ago are becoming more common, happening daily on city sidewalks, in marketplaces, in post offices and factories, in the corridors of your schools. This is the real news. When we brought you the first wave of transmissions in this series, the emphasis of the global media was still clearly upon the other world, the world that remains polarized in fear, and so experiences fear's corresponding destruction. By the last of these transmissions, as a new decade dawns, it is clear that much has changed. The old world is disintegrating. It is falling apart. It is imploding in entropic collapse as the presumptions upon which it was built are, one by one, proved invalid. As a new world, founded upon new principles, expands slowly to preside over the former domain of the old, it is useful to know that no good purpose is served by monitoring every detail of the old world's passage. Customs may be fading away, but no life, no consciousness will be lost. If compassion or educational currents lead you into relationships with those who still pay tribute to the ancient gods of self-righteousness, remember that you cannot serve such people if you allow their interpretations of events to eclipse your own. One's vision of a broad landscape can be blocked by just a small scrap of cloth before one's eyes. They are in difficulty because of their interpretations. Only by remaining true to your own vision can you serve them. Soon your mass communication systems will resound with the messages of the stars. But always, then as now, these messages will be inferior to the awareness of the stars. Allow that awareness to circulate freely in your consciousness now. This awareness will soon be experienced throughout a holy and wholly conscious human species. Those who place a higher value on their own perception than on the interpretative impressions of others, are in touch with informational input far more accurate than the reality descriptions of any external media. While experience of living in an atmosphere of love is certainly a helpful asset, all that is essential is the willingness to live a love-centered life. Those who are comfortable in an atmosphere of love, even if they have occasional lapses into fear, will be drawn naturally into the awakening awareness. There are no arbitrary standards of perfection. People are drawn into loving and fearful groupings not on the basis of deeds, but on the basis of intent. The motivational currents that flow from their hearts attract others of similar vibration, even as they and their world are attracted to the source of love, to its consciousness. and to its eternal life. In the unique inner language of his or her soul, each human being receives the invitation to rejoin the company of love, and resume a place among the gardeners of the universal garden, the garden of which this earth is but one flowering bed.